Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. And welcome to Spring Severe Weather Awareness Week. My name is Laura Lipscomb. I'm the Public Information Officer for the West Virginia Emergency Management Division. And I'm going to be helping host this briefing today. So this year's pretty special for us, for the state of West Virginia. It is the 50th anniversary of a deadly tornado outbreak that actually struck 6 of our southern counties. And we're going to talk about that, beginning with Chad Merrill with WOAY. He's their chief meteorologist. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks for those in attendance today. Obviously, a huge anniversary here in southern West Virginia is the tornado outbreak. I direct your attention to the monitors around you. And I want to start out with the outbreak of tornadoes that happened just a couple of days ago, Thursday, March 14th.
There are some similarities in how that transpired compared to how the April 4th, 1974 outbreak transpired here in southern West Virginia. We had a very strong jet streak moving up into the Midwest, and that helped produce the storm reports that you can see on the lower right, and there was a warm front draped across northern Ohio. So, as we advance here to the next screen, this is the weather map from April 3rd, 1974. The day before the tornado outbreak here in southern West Virginia, there was a warm front lifting north along the Appalachian Spine and a strong low pressure coming in from the southern plains. As we advance, one more graphic here. This is the morning of April 4th, folks. We had the warm front lifting north as a strong cold front was making its way off towards the east. It was actually the warm front combined with the upper level energy that helped spawn the tornadoes across southern parts of West Virginia. As we go to the next slide here, this is the jet streak from the evening of April 3rd. It was rounding the base of the trough in the southern plains, and it was pushing towards the Ohio Valley and southern West Virginia. And in the next frame here, this is during the morning of April 4th. So at about 8 a.m., after the tornadoes had finished across southern West Virginia, that jet streak again was pushing up the Mississippi Valley, and southern West Virginia was in the heart of that with the warm front lifting north and a lot of upper level energy to help spawn the tornadoes, even though they occurred very early in the morning. So tornadoes can happen regardless of the time of day, and we had the upper level energy to move in to trigger those particular storms. As we advance here onto the next graphic, this was the rash of tornadoes during the April 3rd to the 4th, 1974. So you can see in southern West Virginia where the tornadoes occurred, and there was a big outbreak, of course, across Ohio in the Midwest, and that lines up very well with that jet streak and warm front that was lifting north at that time. So there were 148 tornadoes in 24 hours. The next graphic shows our specific region here in southern West Virginia, the list of the tornadoes that occurred between 2:20 and 4:25 a.m. And look at that, the longest path length was 35 miles. Unheard of in southern West Virginia. That tornadoes in the graph are a total of 35 miles, and you can see those storm tracks there from basically southwest to northeast. So if we go to the next slide here, you can see this is the average number of March tornadoes per state. Typically Tornado Alley being across Texas and the southeast. West Virginia in March typically averages 0 tornadoes, but of course we had the outbreak in 1974 in the early part of April. Now as we go to the next slide here, I actually got some information from the Beckley Memorial Airport. This is the hourly temperature observations. And you can see during the morning of the outbreak, the temperature did drop a little bit when the storms came through, and then it rebounded the next day. Again, it was associated with the warm front. We didn't see the cold front cross until the day after the outbreak. So this is the temperature, and the next image we have here is the hourly dew point observations. It was a pretty moist environment with the warm front lifting north, so we had some pretty high dew points. And again, the dew points did not drop. We didn't get the cold air in until the day after the outbreak. And then once we look at the atmospheric pressure during that time as well, we had basically a big dip in the pressure, of course, with the severe weather that was occurring across the region. We had the big pressure rises, though, the day after the outbreak, when we had the colder air move in to the region. So what we can see here is that warm fronts, just like cold fronts, can produce severe weather across the region. And it doesn't matter what time of day. It can happen in the very early morning. It can happen late in the afternoon, anytime. So you should have sources to get your weather information day and night. Have a NOAA weather radio, because these systems can happen any time of day. Now, I was fortunate enough to get 3 interviews from tornado survivors, and actually one of the interviewees is actually in the back of the room, and we were fortunate enough to get Lisa, who lived in Meadow Bridge at the time, and she had a really great story as well. So we want to thank her for being here and supporting this endeavor, this press conference. And we do want to showcase one other interview with a guy from Patterson Mountain, and he describes the situation the day before, the day of, and the day after the event. Can you describe for me the night that the twisters came through, April 4th, 1974?
Well, we were living here in a mobile home on my property I got from my dad, and that evening we watched TV and got the different reports, and we stayed up for a while. And about 11 o'clock, the news had canceled the tornado warnings, so we went on to bed. And about 4 o'clock that morning on April the 4th, we heard loud noise. Matter of fact, it sounded like a freight train, and we got up and looked out the window and just saw bright lights. And the next thing we knew, it was on us, and we were in the air inside of that mobile home, probably from what we saw about the electrical line pulled out of the ground, about 25 feet in the air. And it turned us up sideways, and we pulled the mattress on top of us, my wife Ruth and I, and within a matter of seconds it was gone, and we were lying sideways on the ground in that trailer, mobile home, with the damage all through it.
Did you get any notification just leading up to the tornado that it was going to occur?
No, just the news at 11 o'clock, they said it was still a possibility, but the warning was canceled. But when we heard the noise, we had a pretty good idea of what was happening.
And how long did this whole event take place?
I would say the whole event seemed like 15 to 20 seconds. And now there were still, we were excited and wondering who all else had got in this tornado, and we were happy that we were all right, and we couldn't do anything pretty much till the next morning when it got daylight. So we just kind of huddled in the bedroom around till daylight, and then tried to contact family and friends to see if anybody else had experienced what we did.
So how did you contact family and friends?
We had to walk. My car was blocked in by trees. It was big poplar trees were knocked down, ricked all around it. We were sitting sideways in the mobile home, and so we had to crawl out the back door. And my brother lived over the road, and my other brother was at home in my mom and dad's house. So we finally all got together and said, well, we pretty well had a tornado. And then we was able to get chainsaws and cut our way out to the main road and where everybody else was at and see what had really happened. The photos also I give you were of Meadow Bridge, Cowtown area, and it shows the devastation of the tornado when it hit those homes down there. There's a funny story to go with that one area there. The Smith family had a mobile home beside their grandmother, Miss Patton, and she had a premonition that there was going to be something, so she wouldn't let them stay in the mobile home at night. And they stayed in her house next door, and the mobile home was completely destroyed. But the funny thing was that Steve Smith and Kippy Gwynn had collected minnows out of the stream to go fishing, and they had them in the bait boxes at the house, and those little fish were scattered everywhere. And so the rumor was going around town that the wind was so powerful it sucked the fish out of the water, out of the stream. So that was pretty neat. And it did damage to the school, Meadow Bridge High School, and there wasn't any school for about 3 weeks while they the National Guard and the state representatives come in and start cleaning up things and checking the items and so forth. There was one fatality. Could have been more. That was sad enough, but at least no more people were killed during the tornadoes.
Was it difficult to navigate around this area because of the damage on the roadways, even a couple of weeks after the storm hit?
Oh yes, they had to clear out a lot of stuff, the different debris where houses were damaged and trees were knocked down. It didn't really go too far out of the community for a few days.
Have you ever experienced anything like this since then, or even before that date in April?
About 6 or 8 years ago, there was another tornado warning, and we saw one that was supposed to be in this area, and it went about 2 miles away, but we were able to go on our front porch and watch it kind of move, the storm move through the mountains south of where we live now. And we all went into the basement and stayed until the action was over.
Do you recall the derecho that moved through in the end of June of 2012 in this area?
Very much so, but because my father-in-law was in an accident at that time, and we were at Bar H Hospital when it hit, and it took us 4.5 hours to get from Beckley back to here at our home because of trees and derbish and everything. And again, we had a lot of trees knocked down around here and damage to roofs and such during that time.
So what was the experience like in the derecho compared to the experience in the tornado? Now, they occur in two different time frames,
Yeah.
but what did you remember was the biggest difference between experiencing those two storms?
I believe the biggest difference was the noise factor. The tornado was much louder and more violent, and also during the tornado the trees were twisted, and during the derecho they were just knocked over. It made me more aware of when weather emergencies are given to be on the alert. You know, years ago, all tornadoes won't come through West Virginia, or high winds, the mountains knock it down, but that's not true.
That's exactly.
We can have them just as well as the Midwest.
What ways do you get weather warnings?
Local news pretty much is what we watch, and then now with social media, you get alerts on your cell phones and different social media and emergency broadcasting.
Do you have an NOAA weather radio by chance?
No, it used to, but I don't have one working at this time. I mainly got the cell phone that gives me alerts and different items there.
Now, did your experience with the 1974 tornado really revolutionize the way that you think of Mother Nature? Or do you have a different perspective on storms after experiencing that?
Before that, I was kind of nonchalant about storms. No big deal, it's just a lightning storm or whatever. Even today, when we get a severe thunderstorm warning, I pay close attention to what is the wind factors and are there any tornadoes, because I know and realize it could happen again.
And that was a great story he detailed about the tornado. Our next tornado survivor was in Meadow Bridge at the time.
Our trailer was here, and my grandmother's house was over to the right, and we had just prepared to move in with her, and so we were emptying out the trailer the night and the day before the tornado. So when the tornado came through, we were at Granny's house, and we were told that the tornado picked up our trailer and took it over the power lines and smashed it into the house down below, which is a different house there now. But the Hicks family lived there, and they all huddled in their closet together. And then so we're over in Granny's house, and the first thing we hear, the windows popping out and glass flying everywhere. And so as we wait to see what happened, my mother comes out on the porch over there, and she said, I bet there's not a window left in that trailer. We're getting ready to rent the trailer. I bet there's not a window left in the trailer. So she comes out on the porch, and a big flash of lightning comes, and she comes back in the house, and she said, I don't see a porch on that trailer. And then so she sits and thinks for a while, and then she comes back out again, a big flash of lightning comes. She comes back in the house, and she said, kids, I don't see a trailer over there. There's nothing over there. So we're trying to work around the glass and move around in there, and my brother picks up my granny and brings her over and puts her into bed with me, so we're not all on the glass. And then as daylight comes and we see all the rubble that's down in what's called Cowtown and also what's called High Street, you can see that the apple orchard behind where we live was also taken out, and the National Guard came in and they said that there were 2 tornadoes, maybe 3 tornadoes that hit here. And when you go up on Patton Cemetery, up behind the house here, you could see there was one line that came over what looked like Patterson Mountain. There was another line that seemed to come from the west, and then there was another line that seemed to come from the north. But we spent time when it became daylight digging down in the rubble to salvage what we could before we moved over more into Granny's house. And of course, I'm 11. I'm looking for my Thumbelina doll baby. That's what I'm looking for. And we find, different things that we can salvage. We find my daddy's Bible and secure that, and we find clothes or whatever dishware that was salvaged. Not much was salvageable.
What was the method of getting weather notifications back in the 70s?
I don't know. I don't remember ever getting any notifications of any kind.
Yeah, we just watching television.
Yeah, just watching TV or listening to the radio because the storm was predicted, and at church we were all talking about it Wednesday night. No, it will never come here. And of course, afterwards, anytime the sky would turn yellow like that again, people would get in their cars and go somewhere else just because of the fear. The sky was yellow. It was very quiet before, and then it was very quiet after, and then the National Guard came in and helped us clear everything out.
And our third and final interview on this 50th anniversary of the tornado outbreak in southern West Virginia takes us to Shady Spring. Greetings, folks. Harold Griffith joins us. He's a tornado survivor from the early April 1974 outbreak. And Harold, can you take us through the event from the day before all the way through the end of the tornado outbreak when it happened on April 4th?
Well, it's kind of odd that my dad, the night before, I don't remember, maybe 2 nights before, we had a pretty severe thunderstorm out at Shady Spring, and our house shuddered a couple of times. And my dad said, "Hey, if that happens again, we're going to go to the basement." And I got home late that evening, and the weather was fine. If I remember correctly, when I came up the steps going into the house, the sky was clear. But about 4 o'clock that morning, well, probably about 3:30, I woke up. It was thundering and lightning, and we had a poultry farm which was pretty much decimated with the tornado. And my dad had rented out a couple of buildings to Maplewood poultry people, and they had put in probably maybe a week before about 16,000 baby chickens, and in 2 buildings. There were about 8,000 in each building. And I remember watching out my window, and the power went off. And when that goes off in a poultry house with those young chickens, they just pile up and smother each other. And I was thinking, oh, that's going to be bad for Donnie Moorfield. But then we had another gust of wind hit the house, and it shuddered again. And my dad hollered down. He was downstairs, and he said that we need to go to the basement. And when we got to the basement, I don't know if on a basement, on the ground level, there'll be some little small windows, and the wind was blowing so hard before the house got tore up that it was blowing water through the little windows around the edges of them into the basement. And all of a sudden, the house popped, and it was just like you pop a balloon, and mist filled up the whole house. And when that happened, we hit the floor and ducked down as much as we could, and then the house popped again, and I just assumed that was when all the debris from the poultry houses was hitting the house. And we stayed in the basement And I remember when it was all over with, I mean, it didn't last probably more than, I would say, a minute at the most. I mean, it was moving pretty fast. But I remember after it went by, I mean, just continually lightning. Just the sky, well, not the sky, but I could see through the cracks now we had in the cinder blocks from the basement that you could see the lightning outside. And we got up, we made our way up through the house and could see how much damage was done up through the top 2 floors of the house. And until it got daylight, we didn't really know how much had been done outside. And then we kind of checked on all the neighbors. That thing has so much suction. When it hit the house, it sucked the curtains through the cracks. We had the old crank out aluminum windows. It sucked enough pressure out of the house that it sucked the curtains through the windows outside, and they were flopping outside, and the windows were still shut. So it was tremendous. And the chicken house, the poultry house that got the most damage was one that was in lengthways with the tornado, the way it came. And it was kind of, there again, something I never thought about, but it was locked. The windows were shut pretty tight to keep heat in for the baby chickens. And all the walls were blown out. They weren't just standing there. They were stuck out all around the building. And then all that roofing and timbers and stuff ended up into our house and over towards Glade Springs. They found parts of our poultry houses over in that way.
When did you deem it safe to go outside?
Well, we really we kind of waited till it got daylight before we could go out. I just remember when we went up through the house, our back door was blown open it had a 2x4 stuck through it. And I don't know why, but we kind of pushed it back shut. And then we made our way upstairs. And when we got upstairs, my mom and dad's room was the one that took the most damage. A 6x6 post, I think it's about 12 foot long, had come through right at the base of the window, went through my mom and dad's bed, went through the floor, and ended up down in the living room on the first floor. So it was just like a spear come out of the sky. And it had my mom not gotten out of bed when Dad hollered at us, it had cut her in half.
Wow. Did you see debris from miles away nearby?
It was kind of funny, and you have to realize that back then, 50 years ago, there was no cell phones. There was no way to talk to anybody. And we were just kind of waiting till people got, emergency vehicles started coming in. And then we made our way upstairs. And when we got upstairs, my mom and dad's room was the one that took the most damage. A 6x6 post, I think it's about 12 foot long, had come through right at the base of the window, went through my mom and dad's bed, went through the floor, and ended up down in the living room on the first floor. So it was just like a spear come out of the sky. And it had my mom not gotten out of bed when Dad hollered at us, it had cut her in half.
Now, when the tornado approached your property, did it sound like the freight train coming through?
Yeah, I listened to news reports where people talk about when they're in a tornado. I mean, it was just like standing beside a cold freight train, and everything was rumbling, and it's kind of weird that sound of the wind in that thing. I got chills on me just thinking about it right now.
So, going forward, since that incident back in 1974, have you had a different perspective on severe thunderstorms and the potential for tornadoes in this area?
For sure. Like I said, just thinking about it, I still get. I mean, I'm 69 years old, or 68, and this still it has an effect on you. Once you've been through that, it's just one of the things that never ends. Don't think because we live in the mountains. I mean, it may stop some of them, but believe me, it can happen.
So I think you probably answered this question, but you basically had no knowledge of what was going on to the west the prior day. That's when Xenia, Ohio was hit with an F5 tornado, Brandenburg, Kentucky. Overall, there were like 148, I believe, tornadoes that happened on the 3rd. So you had no knowledge of that just due to the lack of communication.
But yeah, but we may have seen it on the news, but didn't really. There again, we were thinking like everybody does today. We live in West Virginia. That's not going to hit here. But I don't remember anything at all about being warned in any way that that was coming. He was asking me how it affects me today, just like these days when it's getting up 60, 70 degrees, and then I see where it's going to be snowing maybe by Sunday. There's going to be some wind somewhere in this change from that much temperature, and that's essentially what happened that night. It was real nice and warm, and then when that cold front came through, then we had snow that later on. Well, like 2 days later, there was snow on the ground. So when you get these cold fronts coming through, it's to me it's scary.
And folks, we want to thank those who we interviewed: Lisa Good, Randall Patterson, Harold Griffith. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, and a special shout out to senior photojournalists Micah Leith and Directive Caleb Pearl. All of these folks that would have not been possible to produce this segment.
The bottom line was tornadoes, they weren't unheard of in southern West Virginia, but again, if you have the right setup, and that's why we're here today, to inform folks that tornadoes can happen in southern West Virginia. This is the 50-year anniversary since that outbreak. It could happen again, but we want folks to be aware of the possibility of severe weather across our region. So again, that was a setup for the event and the survivor stories, which you can see on the website. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have today's host, John Zielinski with the Raleigh County Office of Emergency Services. Did I get that right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thanks everyone for coming out today, and appreciate the invite to speak today. National Weather Service plays a great role in emergency management. They kind of predict these things. They're our main alerting system that for severe weather to notify the public, whether it's by cell phone or alerts on televisions. So, any tornado watch or anything like that is put out by the National Weather Service. We try to get that out to our local folks so they can get prepared. And that's the big thing with emergency management. We teach and preach year-round about being prepared, trying to get folks to prepare themselves at home. And a lot of, the misconception of we're in the mountains and it don't happen here. Well, I've seen it happen here. I've seen tornado come through, and just exactly what some of the roles and responsibilities is on the local folks when that comes through. You got to kind of take care of yourself. You might be sheltered away from everybody and help can't get to you right then. So you've got to have that preparedness. But what we see a lot on is the notification of knowing that the weather's coming. I mean, different from 1974 until now, the changes in meteorology has greatly improved to where instead of maybe an hour warning, you could give a 3-hour warning that this could potentially happen now. So the technology has improved over the years. So I know here in Raleigh County, we take another role with the National Weather Service, and that is when we start getting 911 calls or reports from the public of hail damage or creeks flooding. Instead of us having to pick up a phone and actually call the National Weather Service, when we enter that stuff into our computer-aided dispatching system to request help, it automatically gets sent to the National Weather Service in Charleston. So they actually know there's an event happening on the ground, that some type of weather or flood or something, so they can kind of focus on that area of what's going on, and maybe something that they haven't been able to alert from. If we're getting already streams rising, they can push out these alerts to folks that it's going to affect later downstream. So our role together with the National Weather Service and stuff in these events is quite big, and I think it's vice versa, the information you give us and the information that we give you. We also, here at the Raleigh County 911 Center, we measure snow for the National Weather Service. Any weather event like that, we take a shift reading. If it's bad weather, we take an hour reading and give them the actual measurements of the snow, because the weather systems are different in this state. Like we said, we're in a mountain state. You drive an hour in each direction, and you can probably get a 10 to 20 temperature range difference, and you'll go from rain to sunshine to snow all in one day. So, you never know what to expect. So we could have 5 inches of snow here on the ground, and in Charleston it'd be sunny and wondering why there's snow in Beckley. So it's things like that that we work good with the weather service and things like that to help. Now, I also have Kevin here with us from the Fayette County 911 Center and Emergency Management that kind of sees the same thing, and I'm just going to open it up to him real quick to see if he had anything to add to that for emergency management.
No, Jim, you hit it on the spot. Our biggest thing is using the National Weather Service to be able to push out any alerts to the public in a fast, steady pace when we give them. That's our biggest goal, is to alert the public, to get them ready in the event of something happening. So between the Weather Service and your emergency management agencies, everybody plays a crucial role together. And by working together and collaborating, we can hopefully get the information out to get you better prepared compared to what it used to be in days of old when there was very little notification at all.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, is to push that information out to the general folks. And we have a lot of travelers here in this area. We got Interstate 64 and 77 coming together in Raleigh County, and now you got the national park that combines us in Fayette County. So you have millions of visitors that are coming now into our area each year. So having a notification like an app or something helps your local folks, but your travelers and stuff need a more broad range of notification, and that's where we depend on National Weather Service to make those notifications. But anything that we do as far as response to these actual events, we try to handle it locally, but just the last tornado that come through closed down a 5-mile section of road. There were so many trees that you couldn't even hardly walk through it. You couldn't take it side by side. So it took Department of Highways, and then we had to call in other state agencies like the Division of Forestry just to come in and cut trees with chainsaws. So they cut trees for over a day and a half just to open the main road up. So there's residents that may be cut off during one of these for a day, day and a half, that have to survive on their own. So that's why emergency management always teaches preparedness. So that's what I want to kind of leave with today is, always be prepared. They can come, this particular tornado I'm talking about, come at 12:30 midnight in this location. So it can come, some people even slept through it and didn't know until they woke up the next morning that their garage or there was trees all in their yard and was wondering what happened. So that's what I leave you. Always be prepared. It could happen any time of the day or the week. Thank you.
Now we're going to hear from Ms. Teresa White. She's a liaison officer with the West Virginia Emergency Management Division.
Hello, I am one of the regional liaisons, and I serve in Region 5, which covers from Nicholas County down to McDowell County and the borders of Virginia and West Virginia. And the office has 6 regions, from one covering Charleston, and it loops around all the way around. We'll show you the map at the end. But one of the things that we try to do is be prepared year-round. So we don't wait for an incident to happen. We actually train and exercise throughout the year so that we can make sure that people are prepared, no matter what the incident is. If it's flooding, if it's weather-related, if it's just individual house fires. We want to make sure that people are prepared and that they do whatever they can to have that level of self-preparedness at home. So they can make a kit they can have alternate routes of travel to get out of their home, to get out of their neighborhood, should something happen and a road be closed. And we work individually with all of the response agencies for training and make sure that they have the availability of any of the training that they request through our office. We work with all other state agencies, local agencies, mental health, fire, EMS, law, it doesn't matter. If anybody comes to us and asks us for training to help them be better prepared, then we want to make that available to them at no cost. We also have the Watch Center, which is a 24/7 phone. They handle multiple phone lines coming in from different school crisis lines to arson hotlines and DEP spill lines. They are always on call, they are always ready and taking the call of anything that would happen throughout the state, so that they make every one of the counties more aware of what's going on an immediate basis. And then we also do exercises throughout the year, so that the first time something happens, we're not meeting on the ground of a severe event, whether it be weather or anything else, that we know those people and we've interacted with them on a daily basis in clear skies. So we try to work through any incident that comes up and come up with good scenarios to be able to impact the communities as well as the state agencies responsible for making their response. We do preparedness planning all year long. We like to go out during this week, during National Preparedness Month and Fire Prevention Month, week. Then we work along with those agencies to be able to go out and talk to the school kids and talk to different groups to be able to help them to understand the importance of preparedness. And then whenever something does happen, we try to go out and help with the locals as much as we possibly can, to be boots on the ground and eyes and ears for them in case that it's needed, and bring that information back to our office, which is then pushed up to the governor so that we can make them aware of anything that would rise to the level of a federal declaration. And over the years, we've changed. Instead of being just reactionary, we are now more of a preparedness type state. We do state of preparedness whenever we know that there's a severe weather outbreak potentially coming. Then the governor declares a state of preparedness so that we can ramp up and be more available for those periods of time. And then should it actually impact and be a direct hit to where we think it's going to come to the level of needing more state resources, then we move that up to a state of emergency. And those help to bring in other state agencies to help at the local level. And then that also works us towards anything that would become necessary for FEMA. So all through the year, we have different things going on. We have exercises that are federal level, all the way down to exercises that are individual airports or individual road closures. And sometimes we do radio exercises as well, just to make sure that people have a secondary and third way of communication in case your phone lines would go down or your radios would go out. Then we work along with the radio operating regions to make sure that they have accessibility to other alternate means of communication, and with our ham radio operators throughout the state. So we don't just stand up when there is an emergency. We are preparing year-round in case there would be an emergency. So, thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. And now we have James Young with FEMA STEC team in Charleston.
All right, I'm going to start with a confession. I was one of those kids that thought that West Virginia did not get tornadoes, because I blame that on my parents, but that's something that I believed for the longest time, but I'm glad that we're working together to dispel that. James Young, I'm the disaster field coordinator and the team lead for the FEMA integration team, which is based out of Charleston. We are part of FEMA Region 3 and been in the state now. I've been working with FEMA since 2017, and we dealt with a lot of different events, and I just want to thank all the participants for being here and for being invited, because the best time to prepare for an event is now, and a lot of times, when we come in, it's too late at that point. And so events like this, I think, are a really good reminder of why we need to be thinking about these sort of things. So most people wouldn't think that FEMA has a full-time presence in West Virginia, but we also know, I think this group here, we know that it rains a lot and we get a lot of different events. So we have over 30 full-time people working day in and day out in Charleston, West Virginia. We're working blue sky events with Teresa and with a lot of other partners, but also a focus on disaster recovery. And you've probably seen us in the news recently with some of the flooding that occurred in the summer. But we are here and we are supporting all phases of emergency management. One of the things that I think a lot of people assume is that FEMA just arrives. We just show up and people will say, well, where is FEMA, or why are we not here? We do everything in lockstep with the emergency management division. And so during a high wind event, we have staff that can deploy and be ready to support the State Emergency Operations Center. We have liaisons. We have what's called an IMAT, which is an Incident Management Assistance Team. So if the Emergency Management Director requests FEMA resources to come in and monitor and to see what federal resources can be brought in, we'll be down there in no time. But again, we do not do anything without the state requesting that. And so there are a lot of resources FEMA can provide during a response phase or even recovery, or even other federal partners. And just to name a few, we do search and rescue, or we source that out to another federal agency. Temporary power generation, the Army Corps of Engineers does that. Commodities, high water vehicles. There's a lot of things that are available, but the major thing is it needs to exceed state and local capacity. We do not want to come in with federal resources until we know that it is more than the locals and state can handle. And so I think that's a very key distinction that a lot of people don't realize. So how does FEMA work? That's a very loaded question because it's very complicated. But again, every disaster starts locally and it will end locally. And so after an event, it is up to the local emergency managers to do an assessment of the damage. And once they're able to validate that, it goes to the state for that same validation. And if it meets certain thresholds, that's when FEMA request is, or when FEMA is requested. And so we have two different types of declaration. Your major disaster declaration, which is what's in the news. That's when the hurricanes happen, it's when the large scale events happen. And that is when, again, it's exceeded state and local capacity, and the state has met certain thresholds of damage to allow us to come in. An emergency declaration is a little more short-lived. This is something more response-focused, but again, it's about needing federal resources. And so if you think about the chemical spill that happened in Charleston, Hurricane Sandy, the Hurricane Katrina evacuations, those were short-term areas where the state was overwhelmed in the response phase, and so we brought in federal support. But the major disaster declaration, that is when you get a lot of FEMA people come in. That's when we stay for weeks, months, and sometimes years at a time, and that's really what gets the headline. And under a disaster declaration, there are two major programs. Individual assistance, which is where we help people who have been impacted by a disaster. That is where you can get funds to help rebuild, or if you lost a bridge, or if you have certain needs, we can help reimburse that. It is a drop in the bucket compared to what people actually need. We always promote having flood insurance and other types of insurance, but we're there to help out whenever others can't. And then public assistance is our more common program. That's where we go in and we reimburse for repairs made to public infrastructure. So think about roads, think about city halls, or anything that is either public or certain private nonprofits that are damaged that serve the public. We can come in and we can reimburse for that. And so we have a staff working events all the way back from 2016 to now, working with the state to close some of these out and to have some new ones. And so in West Virginia, we average about 2 presidential declarations a year, which is that makes us very busy in West Virginia and in Region 3. So when thinking about high wind events, I wanted to go back and think about the last time FEMA had major support for a high wind event. I will never forget where I was in 2012 because I got married on June 30th of 2012, the day after the derecho in Charleston, and to say that was a challenge is an understatement, but still married, almost 12 years later. But during that event, this is where we had both an emergency declaration and we had a disaster declaration. So initially, all 55 counties were were available for the emergency declaration. And we worked with the state to set up a staging area at Yeager Airport. We brought in a lot of generators. We brought in water mills. If you can think back at that time, all the distribution that was happening. And then we even brought in the Army Corps of Engineers, because if there's an expert when it comes to power, that is who it is. And so we mission assigned them for emergency power restoration and to help us to distribute commodities, which is not something we typically do in West Virginia. Most of our events, especially flooding, they happen, the water recedes, and we go right to recovery. So this is, one of the last major events we had where it was a longer term response phase that, again, does not happen very often. So with that, again, we started with that emergency declaration, and it rolled into a major disaster declaration. And so DR 4071, I was not with FEMA at the time, but did some research, and it was approved for 20 counties. And you can see the ones highlighted there in orange that were approved. I said public assistance, that's the one where we reimburse for public infrastructure. $11.7 million was approved for that program. $2.7 million in individual assistance was provided to over 1,000 households. Just as a reference, we're currently working another event, which was the flooding from August. It's Kanawha, Boone, Clay, Calhoun, and Harrison counties. And we're just about to hit the $2 million mark there for a flood event. So just kind of put that in comparison. And then for every program that we have what's called the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. So 15% of the aggregate cost of the disaster, so you combine the public assistance, individual assistance, and other programs, that rolls into a grant program. And with that, we were able to distribute $1.7 million in mitigation grants to hopefully build some resiliency and make sure that the next event doesn't have the same impacts. And that is all I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. And last but not least, we have the Weather Service in Charleston's Warning Coordination Meteorologist, Tony Edwards. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Laura. And it's good being last today because, our mission in the National Weather Service is to issue forecasts and warnings for the protection of life and property. We really couldn't do that without all these folks that are up here speaking to you all today, from the local media all the way up to FEMA. We work together as a team when severe weather strikes. So, we're drawing people's attention back 50 years ago to the 1974 tornado outbreak. And I want to talk to you a little bit about today's warning system. I know your story and some of the other stories that were talked about in 74 was there wasn't a whole lot, if any, warning back then. We've come a long way in 50 years. So today's current kind of watch warning system is what we use, and it's actually three-tiered. It starts with the outlook phase for severe weather. So you can go all the way up to 7-8 days in advance and go to a website with the Storm Prediction Center and see if there's a severe weather threat for our area. It's broad brushed. You can see in this graphic, it's the large yellow area. It's a large regional saying, hey, you got something planned this day? Be aware that there could be something happening. Once we get within a few hours of the event and our confidence has increased that there could be severe weather, then we'll issue either a severe thunderstorm watch, a tornado watch, maybe a flood watch. And that's saying, hey, plan your day around the weather when a watch is in effect. Then when we are either spotting severe weather, or we've had folks like John said, 911 are reporting severe weather, we'll issue a warning saying radar is indicating it, or it's on the ground, say a tornado warning in this particular example with the red boxes there. Those are much smaller. We can issue those up to an hour in advance. Tornadoes here are tough. We're lucky to get a few minutes warning. Quite honestly, with tornadoes in our region, just due to the nature of them. But that's the way the current system works. We didn't have this system as a robust system. We didn't have as robust radar system back in 1974 either. So we've come a long way in 50 years. This is how we get those warnings out to the public. It's the FEMA IA system, Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. It's comprised of wireless emergency alerts, which is on everybody's cell phones. You don't have to download anything. It's already on there. Then the emergency alert system, that's the old system that's been in place forever to scroll information across your TV screen, to put it over the radio waves, the loud annoying beep you hear, and then it's followed by information. And then NOAA weather radio, that's another way to get this information. One of the biggest advancements in a long time was wireless emergency alerts. So this was rolled out by FEMA in 2012. Again, it's built into everybody's cell phone. It allows us to deliver these types of warnings over your cell phone. Any tornado warning that's issued, if you have cell phone coverage, then your phone will go off. Flash flood warnings, if we issue a special tag in there saying that it's not your normal flash flooding, it's severe, it's bad, it's life-threatening, that'll set your cell phone off. Severe thunderstorm warnings, if we have another 2012 derecho, we have the ability now to set everybody's cell phones off that has cell signal. So that's a huge improvement over where we were in 2012. Now, yeah, in West Virginia, a lot of areas don't have cell signal. That's why it's still important to have that NOAA weather radio, to have some way to get alerts if you don't have cell signal. NOAA weather radio can often fill in those gaps where cell phone coverage doesn't exist. So that's our current warning system. We're going to test this on Wednesday, March 20th at 11 a.m. That's going to be our statewide tornado drill. So on Wednesday at 11 a.m. we're going to issue, and all the other offices that cover the state of West Virginia and the Weather Service are going to issue a tornado warning. It's going to have a lot of test wording in it, and so unfortunately that will not allow it to set all the systems off. Your cell phone probably won't go off unless you have a third-party app that's passing that through. Wireless emergency alerts will not go off, but a lot of other systems will. And so this is a great opportunity to test what you would do in the event of a real tornado. And what should you do in the event of a real tornado? You want to be as low as you can get in an interior room as you can get. If you've got a basement, great. If you don't, again, interior room, away from windows and doors. A closet or a bathroom, that's a safe place to be. As this graphic points out, mobile homes are not safe in a tornado. The story that she passed on, luckily nobody was in there, in that mobile home. Because they just become mobile in a tornado. So you want to be outside of those well in advance. Again, luckily most of the time we issue tornado watches well in advance of the event coming in. If you live in a mobile home, that's when you want to get out of there. So that's what we wanted to talk to you about today. Again, that 11 a.m. tornado drill on Wednesday, great time to practice what you would do to get ready for the upcoming severe weather. So that concludes the formal kind of news conference, but be happy to take any questions. Really diverse panel up here, so we'll open it up to questions. Somebody go first.
Are there any plans to get cell phones more involved, because towers go down so often and sometimes it's just not reliable?
That's a good question. I know cell phones are always expanding coverage, and believe it or not, it's actually not bad in West Virginia. There are some areas that don't, and I can't speak for the cell phone companies. I know the state several years ago signed with AT&T to put new towers out across the state, so they're trying to fill in those gaps, but that's where you need to have redundancy. And those weather radios, a lot of people maybe don't know about them or don't realize that sometimes they can fill in those gaps. We had a flood in Kanawha County back last year, and a lot of the folks that we talked to there didn't get the alert, didn't get the warning on their cell phone because they don't have cell signal there. But we did some work, and weather radios would have filled that gap in. They would have got those warnings ahead of time if they'd had a weather radio. So that's why there's 3 different pieces to this puzzle, and sometimes you just have to have one of each to kind of fill in those gaps.
And we want to give a special shout out and a special thanks to the National Weather Service in Charleston, as well as FEMA and the emergency management officials for hosting this press conference and allowing us to speak at that conference, because again, the 50-year anniversary of the tornado outbreak in southern West Virginia. Now let's talk climatology. This is tornado frequency as reported for the National Weather Service in Charleston, broken down by month and year. You can see that most often tornadoes occur in May and June in the Charleston jurisdiction, which includes southern West Virginia, also parts of Kentucky. So climatologically, we are getting deeper into the severe weather season with a better risk for severe weather and, of course, tornadoes. Now, topping the list, you can see 2009, 2023, there were several. 2016, which is an analog year to this particular year, So we've seen quite a few tornado reports. Now, when we break it down by Raleigh County, so this is specifically for Raleigh County, the frequency of tornado warnings issued from the Weather Service, you can see once we get into April and May, that's when there's been a couple of tornado warnings issued over the past couple of years. So we're getting deeper into the severe weather season. You can see the top 10 dates there, 2004, 1998. So you always want to be vigilant, and of course we will continue to warn you if there's any potential for severe weather going through the spring and of course during the summer season. A close match year to 2024 was 2016, and this is the severe thunderstorm warning count for Raleigh County by date. You can see we went through most of the spring without many reports. We had one in early May, and we had several reports during the middle of June into July. So this is the start of the severe weather season. That's why this week is wrapping up Severe Weather Awareness Week in southern West Virginia, and you need multiple platforms to keep you abreast of severe weather. The Storm Watch 4 Facebook page, we will continue to update that. Of course, on Newswatch at 6 a.m., noon, 5, 6, and 11 p.m. And of course, if you download the Storm Watch 4 weather app, we will always keep you abreast of severe weather that impacts our region. So once again, I've really got to give a shout out to the three folks that we spoke to, did a recollection of the tornado outbreak in April of 1974. So we really need folks to remain alert and remain vigilant through the spring season into the summer season of severe weather. So once again, a special thanks to everyone, and coming up in a couple of weeks, we are going to outline the summer outlook, the Storm Watch 4 summer outlook, and what we are going to do, similar to what we did in the winter and then last summer, is give you an idea of the rainfall trends, the potential for severe weather based on previous analog years, and the temperature forecast going forward so that you are well prepared for what's coming up this summer. So once again, you can stay alert and stay ahead of severe weather with our Facebook page and by watching Newswatch at 6 a.m., noon, 5, 6, and 11 p.m. And the Storm Watch 4 weather app will keep you abreast of what's going on in the skies. And it's also very important that you have a NOAA weather radio. Cell phone signals don't penetrate through the entire area, but a NOAA weather radio will keep you informed when you don't have internet connection, you lose cell phone service, maybe a cell phone tower goes down in a storm. So NOAA weather radio is very important, especially in this area where there's a lot of disconnection problems, especially with cell phones, and of course if we get severe weather. So thank you for joining us for the West Virginia Severe Weather Awareness Conference.